You know how we often talk about making a huge change in our lives? Well, the text we're diving into today suggests it's not about some small tweak. It's about a complete and total transformation, a real metamorphosis. So let's get into what that actually takes. So let's start with the big word itself, metamorphosis. What is it really? It's a term we hear all the time, but let's break down what it means in this specific context.
And I bet when you hear that word, this is the first thing that pops into your head, right? The classic, incredible change from a caterpillar to a butterfly. It's the poster child for transformation, for a very good reason. But hang on to that thought.
Because the source we're exploring offers up a second example, and honestly, it's a much more unusual one. The humble, everyday dandelion. And trust me, its story is the real key to unpacking this whole idea. But before we get to the weird stuff, let's start with the familiar. We'll just quickly touch on the caterpillar to make sure we're all on the same page. So here's the most important part. Metamorphosis isn't just about growing. It's a total shift from one form to a completely different one. The source calls it a leap in life, which I think is a perfect way to put it. It's a complete change of what something is. And this just shows you the sheer scale of that leap. I mean, think about it. You go from a creature that's stuck crawling on the ground, totally earthbound, to one that can fly freely through the air. They live in the same garden, but their reality, their entire experience of the world, is fundamentally different. Okay, now let's get to the author's most fascinating observation. This is where the text gets really unique, with something the author literally calls a miracle of nature. The story doesn't start with some moment of wonder, though. Nope. It starts with pure annoyance. The author is just fed up with all the dandelion fluff getting stuck in their window screens. You know, a total nuisance. We've all been there. But then, while looking at these annoying little weeds, the author notices something. Something so startling, it completely changes their entire perspective. And here it is. The author claims that they witnessed dandelions transforming, metamorphosing into plantains. Now, from a strictly botanical point of view, that's a pretty wild claim. But for the author, this wasn't about biology. It was this profound spiritual moment, a wonder of nature, an insight from the Tao. So why was this such a huge deal for them? Because it was a leap in value. It was a transformation from something seen as a worthless pest into a plant, the plantain, that the author knew was useful, that had edible leaves and seeds. Its very purpose and function had completely changed. Okay, so we've got a butterfly that changes its body and a dandelion that changes its value. What's the link? Well, this is the part where the source brings it all home and applies these ideas directly to our own lives. The logic here is actually really simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. If these simple forms of life can go through such a total, radical transformation, then why can't we? It's a direct challenge to how we see our own limits. The author draws a straight line. The leap from caterpillar to butterfly is just like the leap from our normal, everyday human state to what the text calls an immortal state. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean living forever, but more like reaching a higher, more enlightened way of being, free from our usual hang-ups. So, if this kind of leap is actually possible, how do we do it? Well, the source doesn't just leave us guessing. It actually gives us a clear, practical guide, all packed into a 6-character maxim. Here are the 3 pillars, the absolute core of the instruction. First up is selflessness, which is all about acting for the good of everyone without asking, hey, what's in it for me? The second is no self, and this is a big one. It's about moving beyond our ego, that little voice that says, I, me, mine all the time, and realizing we're part of something much bigger. And third is non-attachment, which is just what it sounds like, letting go of our tight grip on things, on ideas, even on results, and just finding freedom in that release. And these aren't just, nice suggestions. The source presents them as the absolute key. It's mastering these 3 internal qualities that actually powers the whole transformation from one state of being to the next. And that brings us to the final showdown, you could say. What does life actually look like before this leap, and what does it look like after? The text lays out 2 very different states of being. And this table just lays it out so clearly. On one side, you have the typical human state. It's defined by selfishness, a strong ego or sense of self, and attachment. Then you have the immortal state, which is defined by the exact opposites: selflessness, no self, and non-attachment. The difference isn't about what's happening outside of you. It's all about what's happening inside. And this right here is the final, most powerful takeaway from the whole thing. This transformation isn't something you have to wait for, like in an afterlife or some far-off future. The text says that by living with these principles, a person can experience that higher, immortal life right here and right now. The change is available to us in any given moment. So we're left with this question to think about. According to this text, a real leap in life doesn't come from changing your job or your city. It comes from fundamentally changing your inner world. It's about that shift from selfishness to selflessness, from ego to connection, from being attached to being free. So what might that idea mean for you?